There it goes. All right. Good evening. Nice to see everybody. We got a couple of new people with us. So I'm going to pray and then remind us what we're doing here and then jump in. Thank you, Father. We're really grateful. We get to come together and with this cool technology that doesn't always work for us, but it enables us to have conversations from across the country and sometimes outside of the country. So thanks for giving us your word to meditate on and think about and try and figure out what you have for us from this ancient Near Eastern text. Help us to be humble and thoughtful and maybe even brilliant sometimes. So we can't wait to hear what your spirit teaches us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So based on, let other people in. All right. Based on that prayer, hopefully you heard a little bit there. We are asking for humility and kind conversations, but I do before I hand this code out to everybody to get you on here, I make sure that I explain to people what they're getting into. So I just want to remind everybody again what you're getting into here. This is not just for Christians. So we've got some people here who used to be good evangelicals, now find themselves outside the church. People who are still staying in the church, but they don't know why they're there anymore because they don't believe half of what's in there. There's all kinds of people on here, and you just never know who you're talking to. So be kind and good to people, and don't assume that you've got it right or that they agree with you on your either liberal or conservative views. We're having a conversation, and what we're trying to do is let the Bible speak for itself instead of let the dogma of the church of 2025 or of Reformation era or of Augustine's medieval era or of the early church. We're trying to let the Bible speak where it speaks, and that's not always easy, and we're all going to have different opinions on that. But people here will have different expertise. Some are more philosophical. Some are just they read the Bible in the morning. That's all they know. They've never read another book on the Bible. So you are in good company with experts and non-experts, and we all get to have some fun with this. So welcome. We're doing a series called what is it called, Sarah? What the Bible says about, with an ellipsis, and then we're just doing different what the Bible says about things, which is really kind of a dumb series title because that's really what we've been doing for the last 4 years, right? We're trying to figure out what the Bible says about these things, but we're trying to just jump in 2 or 3 week topics. So we've only done one so far. What does the Bible say about abortion? And we kind of tagged on euthanasia onto that, but just kind of about what the Bible says about life in general. And today we're going to talk about what the Bible says about slaves and slavery. And hopefully the whole goal of all of this is to help us see that the Bible might not be exactly what we thought it was. That is, it might not be a historical textbook or a scientific textbook or an ethics textbook or a political textbook, right? It might have a whole other thing in mind. And it still may talk about history, science, politics, and whatever else I said, ethics, theology, and stuff like that. But it's probably trying to do something else. Okay, that's the intro. Let's jump in. Let's talk about slavery. Who doesn't want to talk about slavery, right? I mean, we all wish we could have slaves. Okay, hopefully we're not going to go there. All right, here's where we're at. Question is, can we have slaves? I think probably we got 21 people here, 22 people, something like that. I don't think anybody's going to say we should have slaves now, probably. No matter where you're at on the political or theological spectrum, hopefully you're not a big fan of slavery. Okay? The question is, though, what does the Bible say about it? And if the Bible says that we should have slaves, why don't we? Why do we just ignore that? You might say, well, the Bible definitely doesn't say we should have slaves, so we don't have to problem. Well, let's look at it. So I have a little TikTok thing I want to share with you. This is everybody's favorite pastor theologian. His name is John MacArthur. I just wanted you to hear what he has to say. Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
No.
No.
You can't hear anything.
No.
Even when it was on, like not at all, like right now.
No.
It's very low. We can hear. I can hear something, but it's very low.
Something now. Yeah.
Can you hear that?
I'm sure you won't.
Oh,
I can barely hear it.
he's talking about like kind of controversy. Like he the last week he did euthanasia, but prior to that he did like 3 weeks on abortion. He's just kind of talking about
YouTube channel.
controversial topics and what the Bible says about.
Hey,
them.
Suzanne, we can hear you.
Sorry.
Wait, I'm having trouble hearing this. All right, let me just back up. Can anybody hear what's happening on the screen when I press play?
Very,
Yes,
very lightly.
quietly.
All right, I'm going to try it and then I'll kind of repeat it. Okay, but everybody has to be really quiet to try and hear it then. I don't know what to do to make it louder. I'm sorry.
There are parents who abuse their children. We don't have an aversion to having children because some parents have been abusive. Of course, if you have any kind of situation where abuse can be involved. The reason unions grew up in America was not to free slaves. The reason unions grew up in America was because there were people who had businesses and they were abusing their employees. So to throw out slavery as a concept simply because there have been abuses, I think is to miss the point. In any kind of human relationship, there can be abuse. There can also be benefit. For many people, poor people, perhaps people who weren't educated, perhaps people who had no other opportunity, working for a gentle, caring, loving master was the best of all possible worlds. You had the right master, everything was taken care of. So we have to go back and take a more honest look at slavery and understand that God has, in a sense, legitimized it when it's handled correctly by saying this is the way you're to do the relationship. But
All right, so if you could hear it, you understand it, but I'll kind of repeat what the big picture point is. So this is John MacArthur. He passed away earlier this year, I believe, or maybe last year, very recently. Mega church out in California and written a ton of commentaries. And he's just doing a sit down. People are asking him questions. And they asked about slavery. And he said, slavery, our problem is that we have a problem with slavery because of its abuses. Nobody has a problem with marriage because sometimes there are abuses in marriage, or with parenting because sometimes there are abuses in parenting. Why do we have such an aversion to slavery? It might be that having slaves might be the very best thing for certain people if the master is caring and loving and good. And then he goes on to say, after all, Jesus is going to use this, or the New Testament is going to use this as an example of our relationship with Christ or with God, that we are slaves to Christ. All right, so this is his entrance to it, or our entrance to it through him. Just a little more background, not just from him. We'll talk about this though. Bob Jones University, which I brought up when we were talking about abortion earlier, historically, right across the street from you, Bob Jones University, historically would not allow blacks in their school, and many of the fights in the 70s that they were having, the theological fights they were having, were in order to keep segregation in the Christian schools. They did not want to allow African Americans into their schools. So it was a major fight. And so that's one of the main things that lifted up the whole the right, the Christian right. Right, that's where it was with James Dobson and some of that crowd in there. So here's a quote from John Henry Hopkins. This is the mid 1800s. Okay, so think Civil War period time. He says, if it were a matter to be determined by personal sympathies, tastes, or feelings, I should be as ready as any man to condemn the institution of slavery. For all my prejudices of education, habit, and social position stand entirely opposed to it. But as a Christian, I'm compelled to submit my weak and erring intellect to the authority of the Almighty, for then only can I be safe in my conclusions. All right, so let's just start the discussion before we get into the text. What is John MacArthur, Bob Jones, and now John Henry Hopkins? Any thoughts that come to your mind from that? MacArthur saying abuses are the problem. As long as it's not abusive, it's okay. Bob Jones, let's keep it segregated. John Henry Hopkins saying, I would love to be against slavery. Everything tells me to be against slavery, but sorry, the Bible tells me I have to be pro-slavery. So I'm going to be pro-slavery. What you thinking?
Are they all
What-
white privileged men?
Are they all white privileged men?
I know two of them are.
Yeah.
I don't know about the Henry guy.
I believe that he is, yes. Yeah, so that's interesting where the context is. I definitely didn't quote any black speakers in that one.
Just like definition of justice, Socrates asks the sophist, well, what is justice? So I'm going to ask you, what do you mean by slavery?
Okay, so all right, let's talk about what we mean by slavery. Anybody know our cool words here? So in the Old Testament, it's that was a terrible. It's avad. So A B A D or E V E D is probably better. I think. Okay, let's let John Timmerman into the room. Okay, so that's the Hebrew of it, and then we've got doulos. You probably heard doulos, right, before? Because like doula is somebody who assists in childbirth, a servant, right? I think so. It comes from that. Okay, so these are our two words. What do they mean? Servant, slave. That's what it means. We know what a servant and a slave are, but yes, Josh's question still remains. What do we really mean by these things, right? Like, because there's different kinds of slavery, maybe. Maybe that's what's going on here. So here's what we all know, or at least if you've been in Christian circles, you've heard things like, well, avad means, right? Here's the very specific meaning. It means a voluntary working off of debt or keeping captives from mustering rebellion. And, you know, that basically slave trading is condemned in the Old and New Testament. That's not what this is. This is working off debt. Working off debt is no more than like having a job, right? Like, if I have somebody come and clean my house, that's to work off debt probably, or to make money so that they can buy food so they don't get into debt. So there it is. I mean, Bible talks about slavery. It's that simple. That's what avad means. But it's not only what avad means. There's definitely something else here.
But if we're going to talk about the context of what the word means, if you're talking about Paul, he's writing in the context of the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire took war captives. They took all sorts of things to get their slaves. And their empire was built on a lot of slave labor. So it wasn't so much the Old Testament at the time that Paul's writing about it in the verse from Paul.
Right. And if you were considered a slave, you had a better life than most others who were not slaves. So you actually wanted to sell yourself into slavery in that context. If you were in debt.
Yep. There were definitely times it was good to be a debt slave. Yep. Because you were going to die on your own and someone else would take care of you. Yep, for sure. Let's give ourselves a little bit more context, because when we think about slavery, even the pictures that I put up to prompt people to come tonight were pictures of Black people being enslaved in the Americas, right? So when we think of that, that's our context. Okay, they do not think at this time Black versus white. That's just not a thing. Black versus white. They don't. That's not relevant to them at all. They're thinking about like the idea of race. That's not even a thing. They're thinking about national, ethnic, social identities, and none of that had to do with color of skin. So Israel has a national identity over against Egypt or Assyria or Syria or Rome later on, like Joshua was just talking about. Okay, so skin color is a medieval imperial European move that's basically to dominate and create superior groups and inferior groups, and give them the right to take charge. Okay, so we think this is what that is, this black-white thing, but it's not. So it refers to two different things, right? So debt slavery and what we call chattel slavery. So you'll hear, if you're on TikTok or you hear from some apologist or anybody who's standing up at a college campus and they say, but slavery is this, they'll say, no, 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 the Bible slavery is just this. It's not this. Okay. Let's just look at it. Okay. Absolutely, a lot of it is this. Debt slavery. Absolutely. The question is that the only thing being talked about in the Bible? And another question is it always voluntary? I can't even write that there. It's always voluntary. Yeah. And human trafficking, we'll talk about that too. I see that for a second. I thought something else came up too, but yeah, is it always voluntary? And human trafficking, we'll get to that. So let's start off with debt slavery and let's turn to an actual text because that's what we're here to do. Exodus chapter 21, verse 2 and following. And I don't have a whole lot of comments on this, so I want to hear what you guys hear in this. Just kind of summarize it a little bit. Exodus 21:2. Does anybody want to read it?
Got it if you want.
David got it.
All right, give me just 1 second, David.
All right.
If you want that, you can have that because I've got it on here. All right, go ahead, David. I think you were the one who
Okay.
said it.
Exodus 21 begin with 2, right?
Yeah, and go through like stop at 6 just for a pause, and then go through
Sure.
11.
Okay, cool. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall be his slave forever.
All right, so quick summary of that. Anybody? What did you hear there? We're talking about male Israelite, debt slave. How long is it?
6.
6 years, and then they're freed. Yep, 6. So then they can go out. What about their wife?
Go with him.
Okay.
If you're married beforehand,
Becomes
they come out with you.
single. Say that, Russ?
If you're married before you become a slave, then they leave with you. But if you're married during your time as a slave, then they're still the property of the master.
Right. Okay. And then the man can do what if he wants to? If he wants to stay.
Masters.
He can decide to stay and have a permanent mark on him, proving that he's permanently a slave.
Yeah. It's an earring. Yeah. So it's a bore hole in his ear, so he gets some kind of a ring or something like that. Okay, keep going, David. 7 through 11.
Okay, gotcha. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who has designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has broken faith with her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her as with a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. And if he does not do these three things for her, she shall go out for nothing without payment of money.
Okay. All right. So now we're talking about another man, but a man's daughter specifically, right? So a female slave at this point. What happens to her?
She's at the pleasure of the master.
Yep. Yep. So she doesn't go out with the male slaves, right? When they get freed, she's got to stay, but she's at the pleasure of the master. That's verse 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
As a
And
pastor,
what? Go ahead.
as a pastor, thinking about expository preaching, like I would hate to like preach on this. This would be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, expository preaching should do the right thing. At least Christian expository preaching should take you into the Jesus movement, right? So there is something which we're going to do here, maybe not today, but if you only come this week, you're going to hear a lot of horror. We're going to take it through Jesus. Things that go through the cross become a lot clearer, I think, and more beautiful. Well, this never becomes beautiful, but the story becomes more beautiful. All right, so he has no right to sell it to foreign people.
Is this the beginning of selling, like the sex trade? If he sells his daughter as a slave and she's for the pleasure of her master? That where,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep, that's what women were used for.
yeah.
Yep. So we can't sell it to a foreign people. He can do what he wants with her, basically, just like Sharon said. Right? Unless he doesn't take care of her, then she's got some options. A few options there, right? Which means she can probably be bought back. All right. Okay, we're getting big picture here. Just reading Old Testament law. Remember, whenever we talk about Torah, okay, just to remind people what we're talking about here. Torah, we often translate as law. Okay, but that's just our English attempt to try to understand what these things are. Okay, there's nothing in this text that says here is the law, like a constitutional law, or like, you know, like Travis has got books on his shelf about law. That's not what's going on here. Torah could easily be interpreted as something like instruction, or it's stronger than advice, but to say it as command is too strong. Okay, it's a movement. It's a wisdom movement. Okay, this is the way you should go.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
About this section here? Because, and I'm just really having a hard time understanding what it's actually saying, but some of the sentences look like it's actually providing protection for the woman that might not have been there otherwise, is how they would have normally treated a female slave. Because if he selects her for a son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. So it looks protective. If he marries another woman, he can't deprive the first one of food, whereas it seems like that means that used to be, or that was the way, that you could just totally cast off that first woman, but he can't do that. And if he's not going to provide food, clothing, and marital rights, then he must let her go free. I know it says without payment of any money, but that means that so I don't understand the way it was at that time, but I'm wondering if these are actually elevating the status of a female slave. So
yeah, maybe not the status of the female slave, but absolutely everything you said. So when you said you didn't really understand it, it sounded to me like you answered it really well. So that's exactly what it is. And remember, when we were talking about abortion, and we've talked about this many times, and we'll do it again when we get in slavery, to the slavery thing, we'll talk about where the ancient Near East is, right? That's the time period of the Bible with their neighbors and the time period before that. And then we're going to move and say, in some cases, the Old Testament makes this much better. The Old Testament is an improvement on the situation. Not ideal, not what we might want to see, but better than some of the neighbors around them. That's not always true. I think sometimes we do a disservice by just saying, oh, the Old Testament does better than all of its ancient Near Eastern neighbors. It does not. But sometimes it does. And in this case, it does seem to be saying, whoa, 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 don't treat them like others do. This is a protective law. So it assumes that you're going to take these women as sex slaves, but you can't just treat them however you feel like you have to actually feed them. Like you can't just throw them out. And then, of course, we're going to say, we think that it's going to go forward in the New Testament. And what we're going to ask, as we always ask, is how do we go beyond the Bible? Or should we? Right? So I don't want to make too much of this move to here, but sometimes it applies. And I think in the slavery text, it does apply a lot, which we're going to see. We're going to get to that. But I think, Catherine, you nailed it 100%. Right? They're supposed to be taken care of. Now, taken care of doesn't mean that they're to be taken care of like as a regular Israelite born, etc. But if he's giving her to his son, then he's to treat her as a daughter. Okay, so that's something. That's not, just smack around, and there's something there. Now we're going to find there's plenty of other passages talking about smacking around, but this one at least does not. So it seems to be nicer. All right, let's jump to Deuteronomy. Okay, so Deuteronomy is, the second law. It even has, it's a Greek word, right? Deutero is two, and nomos is law. So they're calling it that. I don't know that, it's just called in the wilderness, Bamidbar, in Hebrew. But this is, for some people, this is like after the wilderness. Like they're writing this book as a summary of the others as to what's happening, and writing a second law for the next generation. Okay, so maybe that's the way we should understand it. Maybe there's a lot more going on. We're just going to leave it there. Deuteronomy 15, 12 through 18. Who wants to read that for us?
I will.
All right, Laura, you're on.
Okay. If a member of your community, whether a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and works for you 6 years, in the 7th year you shall set that person free. And when you send a male slave out from you, a free person, you shall not send him out empty-handed. Provide liberally out of your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress, thus giving to him some of the bounty with which the Lord your God has blessed you. Remember, you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. For this reason, I lay this command upon you today. You said through 17?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
18
sorry.
through 18.
Okay.
18.
But if he says to you, I will not go out from you because he owes you, because he loves you and your household, since he is well off with you, then you shall take an awl and thrust it through his earlobe onto the door, and he shall be your slave forever. You shall do the same with regard to your female slave. Sure.
One more.
Okay, sorry, I just had to turn the page. Do not
Okay.
consider it a hardship when you send them out from you free persons, because for 6 years they have given you service worth the wages of hired laborers, and the Lord your God will bless you in all that you do.
Good. All right. So, any differences here? What do you see
Oh, yeah.
here?
Two also with the one.
Gotten better.
Do also with the woman? Yeah. It's gotten better in one generation, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Much better. There's some sacrificial giving from the master of some of his property, or not property, but
Yeah, his property, his flock, threshing
Yep.
floor, wine press.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the reason?
You too were once a slave in Egypt.
That's right. Okay, that's a pretty significant reasoning structure for God throughout the Old Testament. Why should Israel act a certain way? Well, remember what happened to you. You were a slave, I delivered you, I took care of you.
Sounds like I think of the New Testament, we forgive because we're forgiven type of
Right. Yep. That's exactly what I think Paul is doing. Right. Okay.
So if you look at the big picture, it looks like God is correcting what society has put on people previously.
Yeah.
A progression, just as the covenants are progressing.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's right. Although we're also seeing, just to be really clear here, right? We're also seeing a move from the ancient Near East to the Old Testament to the Old Testament. Right?
One could say that.
Good.
One could say that it seems as if God's changing, but I think what you were saying, what you said in the past, is that it's not that God is changing; it's that the people's understanding of God is changing. I mean, but this makes me feel like there's this historical redemptive movement, and there's change here, obvious change. It makes me feel like, oh, God's changing his mind here. Like, this is, but in order to safeguard immutability, which I don't know if I need to. I don't want to get into that right now, but we could say, oh no, their understanding of God is changing. So, anyways, it's a can of worms.
Yep. Yeah, and this is going to be important to this whole thing because we are talking about that progression. Okay, as long as there's progression going on, then we're going to, at least it's going to look like God changes. Okay, and so exactly what Josh just said, right? Do we need to wrestle with this? What do we feel about that doctrine of immutability, or the other word that I'm thinking about, lacking emotions, impassible. Yeah. So, like, we're gonna have to deal with this. Maybe that's all I'm trying to say. Okay? We are gonna have to wrestle with that, and you're gonna have to decide: is it God that's changing, or is it people? And we go back to this almost every single week. I think it's super helpful for us to remember: God isn't writing the Bible; people are writing the Bible. Right? So God lets his children tell the story in their elementary, middle school, high school understanding of God, wherever they're at, their preschool understanding of God. Different people are going to have different understandings of God. And perhaps it will grow as we get more, as people see Jesus, right? That's the whole book of Mark, is about their eyes opening. Right? Because they look out, and they say, well, we see trees that look like men walking around, and then he heals them again, right? He heals the eyes. And like, did Jesus remember the healing of the blind man? You guys know what I'm talking about? Right? And he only partially gets healed, but that's not really about Jesus's inability to let them to heal them. It's the metaphor for what's going on with the disciples, that they're only beginning to see, and he's trying to open their eyes completely. Right? The scales falling off of Paul's eyes, the revelation or the apocalypse, that's what that means. Scales falling off, right? That's all about being able to see more clearly. So I think the New Testament authors are able to see more clearly. Our question is going to be, of course, can we see more clearly than now? That's where we're getting in all of this stuff. Okay. So we've got our passage, Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is a movement forward, it seems like, but also slightly contradictory. I mean, which law are they supposed to find? Which one are they supposed to do? But sorry. Let's go to, let's see here. Oh, verses, nope, that can't be it. Yeah, 39. I think it's the same passage. Now I'm not sure. Verse 39. Does that
sure
say
you're
if
not referring
anyone?
to Leviticus?
I didn't write it down. So yes, it's Leviticus. Where is it though?
25.
How did you do that? Awesome. Leviticus 25. She's referencing stuff here. Good job.
Oh, I have a source over here I'm using, so.
All right, Leviticus 25, verses 39 through 55.
Hey, what was that Deuteronomy passage again?
Deuteronomy 15, 12 through 18. All right, who wants to read Leviticus chapter 25, starting at verse 39?
I can. Chapter 25, verse 39. And if your brother becomes poor beside you and sells himself to you, you shall not make him serve as a slave. I lost it. One moment. Verse 40, he shall be with you as a hired servant, and as a sojourner he shall serve with you until the year of Jubilee. Then he shall go out from you, he and his children with him, and go back to his own family and return to the possession of his fathers. For they are my servants, whom I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. You shall not rule over him with harshness, but shall fear your God. As for your male and female slaves, whom you may have, you may buy male and female slaves, and among the nations that are round about you. You may also buy from among the strangers who sojourn with you and their families that are with you, who have been born in your land, and they may be your property. You may bequeath them to your sons after you and to inherit as a possession forever. You may make slaves of them, but over your brethren, the people of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with harshness. If a stranger or sojourner with you becomes rich, and your brother beside him becomes poor, and he sells himself to the stranger or sojourner with you, or to a member of the stranger's family, then after he is sold, he may be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle or his cousin may redeem him, or a near kinsman belonging to his family may redeem him. Or if he grows rich, he may redeem himself. Continue.
Yep, yep. All the way through 55, please.
Gotcha. Verse 50. He shall reckon with him who bought him from the year when he sold himself to him until the year of Jubilee. And the price of his release shall be according to the number of years. The time he was with his owner shall be rated as the time of a hired servant. If there are still many years, according to them, he shall refund out of the price paid for him the price for his redemption. If there remain but a few years until the year of Jubilee, he shall make a reckoning with him, according to the years of service due from him. He shall refund the money for his redemption. As a servant hired year by year shall he be with him. He shall not rule with harshness over him in your sight. And if he is not redeemed by these means, then he shall be released in the year of Jubilee, he and his children with him. For to me the people of Israel are servants. They are my servants, whom I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God.
Okay. What do you notice?
God is protecting his own redemption from being screwed up.
Okay, yeah.
That
Slavery
there's
is okay for people that aren't also your people.
Right. It works for people who aren't your people. Yep. Do you see? So most people think Exodus is the first part, right? That Exodus was written before these other ones, or at least those passages in the law. They're pretty old. Leviticus and Deuteronomy are probably looking at Exodus laws and reimagining, rethinking. They're innovating. They're going off of that and saying, okay, now what? Now where do we go from here? Okay, so, like in verse 40, how long? When are they supposed to serve till in verse 40?
Jubilee.
Jubilee.
Yeah, I heard someone say Jubilee. Right? How many years is that?
50 minus X.
Yeah, right. It's 49, 7 sevens, 49, 50 years. Yeah. So in the 50th year, that's very different than the in the 7th year at the end of 6 years.
Sounds like bearer bonds.
Yeah. Yeah. And the slaves are worth different things depending on how close to the year of Jubilee they get,
Right.
just like land would be. If the land has to revert back, if you buy a piece of land on year 37, and you're only going to get to use it for 13 more years, then it's not going to be worth as much as if you buy it and there's still 34 years left till the year of Jubilee. Now, Jubilee is just this great moment when everything's freed, right? Everything reverts back to its owner. People doubt seriously whether it actually ever was celebrated, whether anyone actually did it, but it's here at least. And my point, we don't have to figure out what's going on here, is it's different than Exodus and it's different than Deuteronomy. Right? So the laws about slaves are not universally the same. They're not even universally. They're not even biblically the same. Right? Things shift a little bit. Like Tom said, though, that might not be that big a deal, right? Because things are moving forward. If they're moving forward, that's what we need to determine.
Of course, it's interesting because he doesn't say he's serving as a slave. He'll be with you as a hired worker. I haven't looked up the word difference there, but I don't think hired worker has to be a different word than Ebed, right?
That's right. Now, I didn't look it up either, but yeah, just the difference between the end of 39 and 40.
Yeah.
You shall not make them serve as slaves, but as hired workers. So it's opposed to each other. Yeah.
And Israel seems to be servants to Yahweh, and it says in verse 42, for they are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They are not to be sold in a slave sale. And then it says at the very end, what stuck out to me was, for the sons of Israel are my servants. They are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt. And so it seems as if Israel, they're paying allegiance to Yahweh, and there's servant, slave. I know that's maybe a far stretch there, but are they slaves to Yahweh or they're servants to Yahweh?
Yeah. Are you saying, are they like bound or did they bind themselves? Right? Is it voluntary or involuntary? Is that your point?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just going to be a contextual thing, right? Because it's the same word.
The word in 40 is sakir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hired or bound laborers.
Hired. Yeah.
Yep. Sakir. Okay.
Yeah, it seems like they're essentially, Yahweh saying, "These are my servants. These are my slaves. I brought them out of Egypt."
Yeah, nobody else gets to be their master, only me.
That's right. I'm just having fun here, but
yeah. Okay, so the emphasis that I wanted to draw there was that Leviticus and Deuteronomy are innovating on Exodus. And I also want to say, think about this too. These aren't law books in a library that, if I'm feeling kind of like I've been overburdened as a slave, I can go into the library, get the book and show that, like, look, see, here's the rules. You can't treat me like this. I should be able to leave. That doesn't happen. Like, it's a completely illiterate society. There are some people who know how to read, but they're not like sitting down reading scrolls. They're doing work. They're living life. That's just not their thing. Very few people can do that.
Well, and were these even written down during that time, or were they written down or figured out later?
Right. That's a question that scholars are going to argue about for a long time. So some of the law codes are some of the earliest writings that we probably have in the Bible, but they wouldn't have been in this particular format, like showing up in a whole book of Exodus like this. That might not be for 500 years after all this, maybe even 1,000 years, some people would say. But there's definitely laws that exist during this time, or principles that they would have followed that people would have known about. But my point is that there's 3 different kinds of these out there. So depending on where you lived and who you're around, I mean, the rules, and we can't really call them that, right? Because there's no, like Lori said, there's nothing really to read. It would just, it's whoever's got the power is going to be interpreting this and saying what it is. So at some point, Moses is going to, maybe if it's during the time of Moses, he's going to be a judge and he'll make certain stipulations about this. Then more casuistic laws are going to come out of the apodictic ones, right? The apodictic are the big general laws. Thou shalt not kill. If you have slaves, be nice to them. And then casuistic laws will be like, in this case, do this. In this case, in this case, do this. Like lots of little laws to help explain the big laws. And those would change as the centuries go by, as the decades go by, right? There's still laws in the books that say things like you can't take your lion to the movies, right? Like, I don't think that's a real problem, but it's still out there. You can't spit on the sidewalk. Like, who doesn't? I mean, there's a sidewalk, you're going to spit on it, right, guys? Like, it's just something we do. So laws changed over time. Okay, but you noticed as you were reading this, right, as you were looking at this Leviticus passage, that something shifted in the middle. You guys talked about the beginning of it and you talked about the end of it. But somewhere around verse 44, things seem to shift. Look at verse 44 again. As for the male and female slaves whom you may have, right? Who may have, it is from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female slaves. Okay, so it's like things have changed now. You can take slaves from the people around you. Before we were talking about people who didn't have enough money and they hired themselves out to you. Now you can take them from people around you. You may also acquire them from among the aliens residing with you and from their families who are with you who have been born into your land. They may be your property. Okay, so you may acquire, take. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property. These you may treat as slaves, but as for your fellow Israelites, no one shall rule over them, over the other with harshness. Hey, David, if you have your Hebrew text open in verse 45, can you tell me what that word for acquire is there?
Let's see.
You may also acquire or take them from among the aliens. I'm just curious. I didn't look it up, and now I'm looking at it and wondering if it's lakah.
Kana.
Kana?
Qana or Kwnaw. I can show you the Hebrew.
Let's see.
Yes, show me the Hebrew, please. Wait. Yes, okay. All right.
Tiknu, yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right. It's not lakah, so I was just curious. It's a more passive. It's not take, it's acquire. But I was just curious as to why they translated it as acquire there. All right. Anyway, so basically, explicitly says they're master's property. They can be bought. They can be sold. They can be inherited in perpetuity, forever, right? Like eternally. This is what they get. There are limits, of course, on this, but the limits only seem to come for, guess what? Right? Non-Israel. Israel is special. They have their own kinds of things. Okay. So is this what we called before? We had 2 different options, right? Debt and chattel. 2 different kinds of slaves. What's happening in verse 44?
Different rules for different countries.
Yep, for sure.
Or cultures. So that could be theoretically how the slaves got to America by justifying other cultures who had the property rules being imported intact.
Yep. This is one of the major ways that you can justify it. Because it's okay to take them as long as they're not your people. That's not okay. All right, but we're not going into chattel slavery yet. We're just staying with debt slavery. Just want to show you it's already starting even here. Let's look at 2 Kings. I'm still going in order of a particular book that I was looking off of right now. So this is 2 Kings 4, verse 1. How much time we got? We got 20 minutes. Okay. I hope so. 2 Kings 4:1. Am I wrong?
Now the wife of a member,
Yep, that's the one. Go
and
ahead.
the company of prophets cried to Elijah, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, but a creditor has come to take my 2 children as slaves.
All right. So something's happened. All right. Your servant, my husband, is dead. So your slave is dead, and your servant feared the Lord. They're dead now. But now creditors come to take my 2 children as slaves. Because I don't know what to do. So this is back to the debt question. Is it voluntary or not? Because remember our apologetic, our defense of the Bible is always something like, well, they're just hiring themselves out. So it's okay slavery. But even debt slavery is not voluntary necessarily. Your children are being taken to pay a debt. And if we went back to Exodus
We still
21,
got that same problem today when we say things are voluntary, but they're not. Like the voluntary work program in ICE detention centers, where there's been multi-million-dollar lawsuits that found that it's not actually voluntary, that they're forced to do it. Yeah. That goes back to before the current administration, FYI. This has been a years-long process, not meant to be political.
Yep. And if you look back to Exodus 21, which is the one we started with, where we noticed that the women were being taken and the rules weren't the same for the women, right? And I can't remember. I think Catherine maybe said, "Is this?" No, I can't remember who said it. Anyway, someone said, "Is this sex slavery?" Yeah. I mean, that's not voluntary. Nothing here in Exodus 21. There's nothing here in 2 Kings. And that little piece inside of Leviticus about it being voluntary or keeping captives from mustering some kind of a rebellion, because that's what's always said, right? It's just to keep the captives from climbing all over us, or it's just voluntary. Those are the only 2 reasons, and nothing in here talks about those things. All right, let's look at another verse, Deuteronomy 20. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 10 through 13. Who wants to read that passage?
I have it.
Okay.
When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it.
Okay. So again, the question of, is this voluntary? Voluntary slavery. So what's going on here? First of all, you can offer them terms, right? They can be your vassals. You're the suzerain. You get to be the big boss. They can become, you can offer them vassalage. They can become your vassals. And if they refuse, what do you do?
You take them into slavery, basically.
Yeah, well, even You should besiege it, and then if he gives it into your hands, what do? Because
And then
that's what you're offering to begin with. We'll make you into slaves if you want. If they say no, thank you,
then you kill them.
then you kill them. That's right. So, I mean, I don't know if you call that voluntary. Like, oh, you have a choice, right? I mean, you always do have a choice, I guess. Either become slaves or you die. Some people wouldn't consider that much of a choice. But I guess in some sense it is.
I keep on going to the New Testament. Forgive me, but I want to say we're slaves to sin, and then propitiation. I'm thinking these like we're the Lord's Prayer. Excuse, please forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Like that's debt slavery. Like it's kind of like payment for our sin. But I know we're gonna get there next week. So, but
Yep.
that's just reminds that.
Yep. But, Old Testament's there. Unless you just say, oh, that's the Old Testament. I hear people say that all the time. Oh, that's the Old Testament. Like it doesn't matter anymore. But it's part of the story, right? God's people are supposed to be doing this. I mean, they might be more right than we admit that it's just the Old Testament. We don't care. But I think it's pointing us somewhere. So offer them vassalage. If they refuse, conquer and kill them.
And
Numbers
then
31. Oh, go
And
ahead,
then
Sharon.
it takes their women.
Yeah.
Takes the women and the children and the livestock, and I mean, it gets worse.
Yep.
Yeah, they put women, children, livestock. They're all the same. Take them as
Yeah.
plunder. I mean, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, this is your Bible, right? This is the holy book.
Right. This is in the Bible. That's what I feel like.
Yeah.
We just people just read past this stuff and they're just, oh, we'll just ignore that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But-
mean, I tell
but
people
it
that God
does.
tells you to take sex slaves for yourself. Should we be following the Bible? Mm. Don't be biblical. Be Christian. But even that's like, what? How can you be like? That's what it means to be Christian, to be biblical.
Well, let me say this: that
Read the Bible correctly. Good.
the Mishnah, the Jewish tradition, Judaism has the Mishnah, which tries to interpret the laws, and then you have Mishnah Torah that was written by Maimonides, and then he tries to go and like reconcile all the contradictions that basically even rabbis they write on these laws, and they're trying to figure this out. What do we follow? What do we not follow? And so even the Jewish people, Judaism, current Judaism, there's so many different sects because there's discrepancies. There's no systematic way of going through this and going, oh, this is exactly what we need to do. So we're even as Christians, we're looking at the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and we're going, whoa, what's happening here? Well, even the Judaism does the same thing, and so it's fair to do this, and we should be doing it as Christians.
Yep. And we've said many times, I think, in here, when Jews interpret Scripture, or when Judaism does, when the rabbis are doing it, they disagree with each other, and it's all considered authoritative. Right. So the Mishnah is authoritative for Judaism, but the Mishnah is commentary on Torah, and it has all these different, like Rabbi Gamaliel says this, Himmel says this, Rabbi Gamaliel says no, this, and Rabbi whatever says this, and this, and it's like, okay, so which one is it? Yes, it's authoritative, because they don't think of the Bible as an ethics book that is teaching you how you must act in this particular situation, but rather, hopefully, more like, I don't know this, but more like a wisdom book. At least that's what we should be thinking of it as. Although this doesn't look a lot like wisdom either. So how do we get there is the further question, which we're going to get there, but we still got to remember all these things. So killing, conquering, taking the women as slaves along with the property, because women are definitely property. And we're going to do a whole thing on what does the Bible say about women, specifically women in leadership at some point too. So that's in the list that I'm planning on doing. But number 31 has Israel actually doing this to the Midianites. We don't have to read it, but doing these exact same things. Just But enslaving people to keep them from rising up has never really worked in history. Works a little while, but that's the big problem, right? Egypt wants to do that to Israel, and doesn't work because God comes in anyway. But perhaps it's a gentler form of slavery than all the people around it, or even from what we're seeing right here. So, like, better. Remember the ancient Near East moving forward, better than the countries around it. That's the next thing that we would think. Like, okay, maybe it's just simpler. It's kinder. It's slavery, but it's not as harsh as all the other ones. So we actually have the other laws. We've got lots of other laws. A lot of people think that the Bible is the first book written out there. It is absolutely not. There are tons of other writings that come long before the Bible does. Not even the Bible, of course, the Bible, because the Bible isn't bound together until this, first millennium. But even the texts that we have stuff that's older like by 1,000 years older, not just like 20 years earlier, like a long time earlier. So, for instance, that Exodus 21 is part of the covenant code. So remember, Exodus 1 through 15 is all about the story of freeing the slaves. 15 is the Song of Moses. Then we get into this movement to Mount Sinai. Chapter 20 is the 10 Commandments. And then the covenant code, 21 through 23, is there. And then everything else is tabernacle, which is interesting. Nobody ever wants to read chapter 24 or onward. That's the whole point of chapters 1 through 15, is to get to chapters 24 through 40, is when the tabernacle, so they could worship. Let my people go so they'll worship God in the wilderness, right? That's what they're going to do. That's when they're going to get the law, the instructions, the Torah. Okay, so we have these laws. Exodus 21 is this covenant code, and the covenant code is adopting and adapting the codes that were before it. Okay, that is, they know about these earlier law codes that are out there. So you guys have, I know some of these you've heard of, right? Like Hammurabi. I think it's 2 M's and 1 R. I always get that wrong. Like I used to spell necessity, always wrong. But Hammurabi. Hammurabi is there. And we have Middle Assyrian laws that are from long before this, that predate Torah by almost 1,000 years, and the covenant code by centuries at least. I want to make sure you understand that. Just my own. Okay, so here's Exodus 1 through 15, right? 16 through, we'll just say 19. Chapter 20, then 21 through 23, and then 24 onward. Okay. These are going to come in pieces. Okay, and I'm being ridiculous in the way I'm bringing them into pieces. I'm more thematically bringing them into pieces than I am literarily. Okay, but this covenant code right here is older than these kinds of things here. Okay, this is first, or so scholarship says. So they come in pieces. And remember we talked about what times, like the E source and the J source, when they're writing these particular texts. If you're listening to this right now and you have no idea what I'm talking about, just all you need to know for this is that different portions, different verses are going to come at different times. And then someone later, an editor, a redactor, a compiler, is going to come through and take this and this and this, and they're going to put them together. Okay. However you've heard that they do it, it's probably not the way they actually do it, but something like that is happening. Okay. Probably there's not a J source that was in the 9th century, an E source that was in the 8th century, a JE source in the 7th century, a 6th century P source. Like, that's probably not what's happening. But something like that, where the different sources are brought together into this compilation. So no matter when this covenant code is written, the codes of Hammurabi and the codes from earlier in the Middle Assyrian laws, they're hundreds of years earlier. Okay? And this means whenever we get the Torah, okay, again, this is all am a rabbi, middle of Syria. This is ancient Near East. Whenever we get Torah, it's significantly later and moving things forward, or so some people would say. Okay? It's taking those old things and saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. You can take sex slaves if you want to, but you can't, beat them until they die. Instead, you can just beat them a little bit, right? And you're like, okay, I'm glad for that, I guess. But you'd really like God to just come and say, what the heck? Right? Like, why is any of this happening? But he doesn't. And we'll have to wrestle with all that. With that said, Exodus 21, I got just like a couple minutes here. Let's do, actually, no, you know what? Maybe we'll just stop, since I just gave a big summary. Yeah. So I've got a few more short texts. We've done the big texts from Torah, those long passages. I've got a few little short ones and a couple that I want to pull out of the big ones that we just met to kind of bring it all together so you can see what Torah is doing in order for us to make this move, ancient Near East to Torah. And then we'll see what the New Testament says about slavery. Okay, that's the movement that I'm trying to get to. So next week we'll do that ancient Near Eastern thing. We'll talk about, is the Bible actually more humane or not? Okay, and I think in slavery it is more humane than its neighbors. I don't think that that's going to necessarily solve all of our problems. It's going to make us feel a little better, though. That's the best I can say. All right. Do you guys have anything else you want to add? Is anybody ready to leave Christianity now based on seeing these texts? Because if so, I've done a disservice to you. I don't ever want that to happen. I just want you to be honest and say, here's what the text is actually saying. Now, how do we fit in how does our Christianity work now? Once we get the truth about things. And the truth is, we just aren't given the truth most of the time.
I think God was smart not to have me be born back then.
Not to have you born back then?
Not to have me born back then.
Yeah, I think you should be very grateful.
Yes.
We live in a wonderful time compared to that.
Yes.
It's so hard to pin you down to figure out what you believe. And it sounds, and I'm not trying to do this. Sometimes I do, though. I'm going to try to pin you down right now. Do you adhere to the documentary hypothesis? It seemed like that was the case when you just said the J source, the E source. I know it's a scholarly consensus, but
no, that's not the scholarly. The documentary hypothesis is not the scholarly consensus anymore. So it was the scholarly consensus. So documentary hypothesis is that these things are at different times and places. Like this could be in the 9th century, and this could be in the 8th century, for instance. And someone came along in the 7th century and put these next to each other. Okay, that's what it is. Like 3 verses here, and then somebody stuck in another 4th verse that came from a group hundreds of years later, priests who read this passage and went, "Ooh, let's add some stuff here." Okay, but the documentary hypothesis is a very specific thing that has 4 different sources, and that's all. So it has 4 sources, and they happen from the 9th century to the 5th century. Okay, so now I think generally scholars would say it's just harder than that. It's harder than just having 4 simple sources like that and making it all work. But I do think there are sources that do prefer Elohim and Yahweh names. They're definitely a priestly class that's going to come in later and make some editorial comments. Those things happen, but I'm not persuaded by any particular source. There's something called the New Documentary. It's changing every day. So it would be my joy to be able to actually be smart enough to contribute to that conversation.
Oh, you can. I know you can.
I am not. I'm not. I can't see those distinctions in Hebrew well enough to be able to tell what's going on.
Another quick question: oral tradition coming down, and at some point these laws are going to be like put into a scroll or something. How are we getting the law of Hammurabi? On the top of my head, I can't remember. How are these written down somewhere? I mean, obviously, it seems like so.
Yeah, you can find these. I mean, you could just Google Code of
They're on,
Hammurabi. You can read.
they're on clay tablets, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So, but if these laws are written down and it's not oral tradition from the law of Hammurabi, how are we or can we deduce from that logic that some of these writings that we're saying were passed down orally and written down later and redacted, or were they written down on some kind of um, clay tablet or stone or whatever, cuneiform,
You're saying, could Israel's also have an earlier one? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Um, sure, maybe, but Israel just doesn't exist. That Israel's a nation come lately, so they didn't exist back then. So Israel comes in. Hey, Travis, nice to see you. Israel's going to come in much later.
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is, and I understand that. What I'm saying is, if we're having older texts or older traditions being put down on some kind of being written down, so to speak, but we're saying that Israel, even though it comes later, it's not being written down; it's being passed on orally. Is that? I'm not sure if that's a scholarly consensus, and that this is going to be passed down and then put down onto a scroll like what 5th century or Second Temple Judaism, or some do argue that that Moses, this is in my opinion, I'll give it out there. It's absurd that somewhere in the wilderness Moses is writing Torah down, you know what I mean, on some kind of stone or clay tablet.
Right. So, all right, just because this isn't the main topic of our conversation, let me just say, yeah, there's oral tradition that's going to go for centuries, perhaps, but there's still going to be scholarly questions as to whether those stories came from an original person named Moses and Israel going through the wilderness and orally handing it down, or whether those stories are created during the time of the monarchy or during the time of Persian period or anything like that, created and put back in to give them a story for their time. So that may not have answered your question, but let's you and me talk about that one on Thursday if you want.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, because I don't know that most people care about the theories of transmission of texts. I mean, maybe you do, but we have talked about that here. Any other comments on slavery? Again, back to the question: did anybody just become a non-Christian? Hopefully, don't raise your hand. Don't tell me that.
I will tell you that for me, this session, I did not expect it. I am like totally triggered. I am reeling right now with this whole, it's interesting. This is stuff I've read before, but I'm having this big emotional response to what's in there. And that's great. I'm totally fine with that. It's like, okay, God, what are you doing right now with this? What do you want to tell me? But one of the things, so I know he chose Israel as his own people he's trying to communicate to us who he is. And then they knew so much less, of course, than we know now. So if I'm just going to look at them as an example, at least what I can take away from today is that, okay, it's better to be one of his people than to not be one of his people. So that's where I'm going to start.
All right. Yeah. And of course, remember who the authors of this are, right? His people. So, yeah. I mean, of course it's better to be an American because I'm an American.
To me, it's like such a huge reminder of like God's love and covenant for mankind. Like, why does God work with us when we just keep messing up so dang much? And then why do we take in our modern evangelical circles sometimes and become so judgmental of others? Like, God was so willing to work in the Old Testament and say, you know what? You can go ahead and have your sex slaves, but treat them a little bit better. because he's choosing to side with mankind and accommodate that much. And like the trajectory is going to change as we go forward, right? But like it could have just been like, hey, no, don't do that. And like he said, don't kill your brother in the Cain and Abel stories. Like, and like you have a hard rule, but then he doesn't really punish Cain when he does it anyway. Um, and you know, lots of other stories where isn't it great that God made a promise to take care of us, and no matter how many times we mess it up, He still does it anyway.
That feels like a good way to end our time, whether it's everyone agrees or not. It sounded really nice, and it's at 9:16. So we can keep talking about it, but let's at least close out this for those people who feel like they've got a time constraint. 9:15 is our planned time. So thanks.